joining us this evening for our City Council meeting. We'll go ahead and get started. Connie, could you please call the roll?
Adamson.
Here.
Gray.
Here.
Cheatham.
Here.
Johnston.
Here.
Burke.
Here.
Glad.
Here. Thank you. If you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, after which, if you would remain standing for the invocation, which will be offered by Tim Bridges from the Calvary Chapel.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, on behalf of all of us gathered here this evening, first of all, I want to thank you for your abundant blessings for us, Lord. Thank you for our nation and our freedoms that we have. And like it says in your word, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. And thank you that our city council chooses to start meetings acknowledging you. Our hope ultimately is in you and your grace towards us, and we need that every day. And as the council meets tonight, Lord, grant them wisdom to govern amid many opinions, to have a sense of fairness in responding to the welfare and needs of our fellow Pocatellans, a vision for our future, harmony even in the midst of disagreement, peace in their lives and in their families' lives. And I pray for the agenda tonight, and let them have the assurance of what pleases you and what will benefit all of us who claim beautiful Pocatello as home. And I say this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. We will move on to agenda item number 3 is the consent agenda. The following business items may be approved by one motion and a vote. If any one member of the council so desires, any matter listed can be moved to a separate agenda item. A, minutes. Council may wish to waive the oral reading of the minutes and approve the minutes from the agenda clarification meeting and regular council meetings of December 7 and 21, 2017. The December 21, 2017 study session clarification working lunch and January 4, 2018 City Council liaison working lunch and the agenda clarification meeting and regular council meeting of January 4, 2018. B, Treasurer's Report. Council may wish to consider the Treasurer's Report for December showing cash and investments as of December 31, 2017. Joyce, how are you?
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Joyce Stroshine, Chief Financial Officer for the City. Tonight I'm presenting the Treasurer's Report for the month of December 2017. Total cash and cash equivalents represent 88% of the City's monies, totaling $33,160,623. Total long-term investments of the City are $4,651,715 for total cash, cash equivalents, and long-term investments of $37,812,339. This amount is down $1,518,020 for the month of December. On page 2 of the report, I've highlighted some key receipts for the month. Airport grant, $52,095. Animal control donation, $55,461. Transit grant federal, $87,216, and transit grant state of Idaho, $258,793. The remaining section details the net change in cash and long-term investments for the city. Page 3 of the report is we report on the trust funds. Total cash and cash equivalents, $1,132,439. Total long-term investments, $4,468,190. Total cash, cash equivalents, and long-term investments, $5,601,630. Total cash receipts for the month are $28,528, and disbursements were $54,842. Net change in long-term investments, a decrease of $19,021 for an overall decrease of $45,335. Page 4 of the report. This report lists all the fund's cash balances with net change for the month. I've highlighted the general fund, who had a cash ending balance of $3,842,346, and it had a net change of a decrease of $1,629,633 for the month. Page 5 of the report is discussion and analysis for your review. Page 6 of the report is the 5-year trend of cash balances. This report continues to reflect a strong cash position. I would like to note that in 2014, December of 2014, the general fund was at a negative $810,537. We are now at the $3,842,346. And it was due to the wisdom of the council adopting strong budget strategies and strong financial policies that enabled us to develop and create the reserves that are required for the city to operate and have the kind of cash flows that you need to operate on an ongoing basis. Because as you remember, the first 3 months of the year, we are basically operating off of reserves and minimal revenue streams. Our major revenue stream comes in January when we receive our property tax remittance for the general fund. And then our other two, the other comment I would make is the 2 negative cash balances, which are for the Transit Urban Fund and the CDBG program. Those negative balances are covered by grant receivables because they are based on a reimbursement basis. So this is a very strong report. That concludes my report.
Any questions, council? Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you.
Agenda item C, Pocatello Development Authority appointment. Council may wish to confirm the mayor's appointment of Jim Johnston to serve as the city's representative on the Pocatello Development Authority, replacing Steve Brown. Mr. Johnston's term will begin January 19, 2018 and will expire May 1, 2020. D, donation acceptance DARE vehicle. Council may wish to accept the donation of a 2014 Jeep Wrangler Sahara JK 4-door from Bannock County DARE for the use of the Pocatello Police DARE program, and authorize the mayor's signature on documents related to the donation, subject to legal department review. All modifications made to the vehicle were paid for by donations from the community at zero cost to the city. I might add, before I take a motion, that DARE car looks incredible. I've only seen pictures. I can't wait to see it in real, true life.
I've seen it in real life.
What?
I've been in it.
Why is the mayor always the last one to see this
I'm their
stuff?
replacement.
Oh, that's right.
So when you're not available, I look.
Super. The pictures look great. I'm not happy with our DARE guy for not showing me before everybody else. We will cover that one later. I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion by President Johnston and a second by Adamson. Connie, could you please call the roll?
Johnston.
Yes.
Adamson.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Cheatham.
Yes.
Lurick.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 4, communications and proclamations. We have no proclamations. However, we do have a scout troop in here. I'm assuming it's only one troop, right? Are you all the same? You are? One of you stand up and tell us where you're from, what troop you're in, and...
My name is Ross Gibson, and we are the 11-year-old scout combined troops of 161.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. You look good in your uniform. What are you two wearing right there? You're not in a uniform. Oh, you got it. Okay. All right. Giving you a hard time. You look great. Thank you for being here with us. We'll move on to agenda item 5 is a calendar review. Calendar review. Council may wish to take this opportunity to inform other council members of upcoming meetings and events that should be called to their attention. Other meetings on February 1 at 1 p.m. we will have a council liaison working lunch. At 5 p.m. we will have a special city council meeting with the fire union quarterly report. At 5:30 p.m. will be the clarification meeting. At 6 p.m. will be a regular city council meeting. That's all at February 1. February 8, 9 a.m. we will have a study session. Also on January 24th from noon to 7 p.m. PRT will be hosting an open house and looking for input on the services draft master transit plan at the Senior Center at 427 North 6th Avenue. Winter programs are happening at the Zoo, Idaho. Contact the zoo office for more information. Snow removal reminder: when clearing sidewalks and or driveways, do not place snow in the street. It becomes a driving hazard. We will move on to agenda item number 6. Appeal of Director's Interpretation Packer. Dave Packer, represented by Rocky Mountain Engineering and Surveying, has appealed the Planning and Development Services Director's interpretation of the zoning ordinance, specifically to the determination was made that duplexes must meet minimum lot size requirements rather than square foot per unit minimums as is used for multi-family developments. This means they must be on individual lots of 8,000 square feet each in residential medium-density single-family RMS zoning districts as required in Pocatello Municipal Code 17.03.240. Duplexes are allowed in RMS zoning districts, however, multifamily developments are not. The applicant has submitted a subdivision short plat to allow a duplex development east of Hawthorne Road and south of Quinn Road within a residential medium-density single-family zoning district. The applicant proposes having several duplexes on one lot. Good evening.
Mayor and Council, my name is Mitchell Greer. I'm with Rocky Mountain Engineering and Surveying at 600 East Oak Street here in Pocatello. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I'm going to keep my comments very brief. I think the packet has a lot of information in it. Obviously, we're here because we don't necessarily agree with the director's opinion on this particular matter. And so I'll just give you a little bit of a background. The project, I think that we presented, we didn't do a good job in our application, at least even showing you where this is. So we're talking about an area that's south of Quinn Road and east of Hawthorne Road here in Pocatello. There's an improvement project that was proposed for this intersection that's been delayed a bit, but that's going to get improved at some point. Currently, there's a single-family residence that's located on the parcel. And you can see kind of the surrounding areas. There's a lot of open vacant land in that area. The city of Chubbuck is to the north of Quinn Road, and there's a lot of mixed-use developments sporadically through that area. We have Quinn Meadows rehab in that location. And then, you know, there's some apartments that are kind of mixed throughout this area, but generally speaking, it's kind of a low-density residential area. What we're proposing, and if I can turn on the layer that kind of depicts the project. So this is the project. It's a little hard to see on that screen, but we're essentially showing 16 duplexes. Those duplexes are side-by-side units, so there's no up and down units or anything like that. What we propose in our plans is we do have a firewall that separates each unit, so it's almost a townhouse. And by I say almost, there's a few distinctions that we don't meet, and that's essentially why we're here. So I want to point out that this is an infill development. The criteria for infill development is met in this case. The first criteria that's important that we note is that we have less than 250 feet of frontage. I think on Quinn Road, we have about 130, we have about 30 here. So that's one of the criteria. Another criteria is that the project have utilities adjacent to the project and that you don't have to extend utilities to service it. So this utilities are available in Quinn Road and as well in Hawthorne Road. So it qualifies for an infill development, which is why we're here. I think everyone knows if we go through the comprehensive plan, we go through the zoning ordinances, we pound infill development. Every time I go to planning and zoning, everybody says, why aren't we developing in these vacant parcels? Well, the reason why we're not developing in these vacant parcels is because it's difficult to develop in these vacant parcels. And so we think that this is the time for you to have some vision and allow this project to move forward. Last year, we proposed this project as a fourplex development. And that fourplex development was proposed. We had to change, we requested a zone change to residential high density, and we had 40 units in there. That project was denied by planning and zoning. There was a fair contingent of the neighborhood that came out in opposition, and the planning and zoning denied the zoning change request. after that, we retooled, rethought, and we came up with a duplex concept. So instead of having fourplexes, now we have individual duplex units or two-family units, okay? So two-family, what's really important to note is our zoning district is RMS, and duplexes are allowed within the RMS zone, okay? So that's very important. We're not asking you to approve duplexes that wouldn't be allowed in this area. Duplexes are allowed. The request we're making is to not have to put the duplexes on individual lots, okay? We want to have just a single parcel owned by Mr. Packer. They're going to be rental units. There's no, that's no distinction. But if we put them on individual lots, they're still going to be they're still going to be rental units. It's not going to change that situation. And so for a number of reasons, utility service becomes difficult as we have individual lots because DEQ gets involved and we have a private setting here. It's not a public infrastructure that's going in there. It's a private infrastructure situation. We have private access. We have separate utilities are not provided to all the buildings and things like that. So we're not really set up for separate ownership. And then Mr. Packer has the project financed as a whole, and he can maybe discuss a little bit about some of the issues associated with that. But we've always had this project envisioned as a rental type situation. So I think staff's concern, or one of their major concerns, is that this is a multifamily development. And in some aspects it is. It's multiple duplexes, right? But again, we believe that as configured, this would be improved on individual lots. That's the only thing that's holding us back here. It's not density, it's not the number of units, it's these things. And I can walk you through how I believe the density and what we have shown here meets the code. It's pretty technical, it's a little time consuming, but I can do it if we need to. I'm saying that I believe it meets the code, and I think Mr. Packard believes we could get this density based on the number that we have there. So we're just asking to not subdivide it. We're not dedicating any utilities or right-of-ways necessarily with this project, and so we believe it works better for us and is in the public's interest, really, to just allow us to move forward the way we have it proposed. And I think we believe that this is the project that's going to say, hey, Pocatello really does want infill development. And so we ask that you, I guess, agree with our project. I can kind of tip it up and show you some of the details of it, but that we be allowed to move forward. Again, we believe the density can be achieved through the zoning and meet those regulations if required. And so materially, I don't think the project would change at all if you guys grant this, or if you didn't grant the exception, we would come back and just have to subdivide it, and it makes it much more difficult for my client. So I guess I could answer questions if you have them, or we just ask that you approve it.
Questions, council?
So what I'm saying is that you're reducing from what code requires from 8,000 square feet per unit to 5,015 square feet per unit. Is that right?
I disagree with that statement. So
it says right here 8,000 square feet, residential medium density single family.
That's staff's interpretation. If you look at my letter, if you refer to my letter, which indicates our total area of, again, we have about 3.2 acres, but we have a single family residence in there. And if you take the total area divided by 8,000 square feet, you get that density that we're showing.
But
What staff is saying is that we're required to subtract out roads and driveways and things like that, which I don't believe the code requires us to do. It's a private drive, and it doesn't have to be deducted from the.
So our codes don't require impermeable surfaces. There's not a
Of course they do.
limitation.
Of course they do. But it doesn't require you not to include that in the lot area. It doesn't require you to include it in the density. Everything has to be paved. It's just all the parking areas, all the drive areas, just a portion of that pavement's going to be owned by one of the lots or one of the parcels if we subdivided it.
Well,
And there's more detail about how I believe it. You know, if you want me to get into it, it seems like maybe you guys do. I can walk you through it, how the density would work. It's probably going to take maybe 15 minutes or so to walk through it.
Let's have staff and then we can call it back.
Okay, we'll go ahead and have, any other questions before we have staff come up? Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Melanie Gigley, Director of Planning and Development Services for the City of Pocatello. Some of what I would say would be a repeat of Mitch, so I'm not going to spend too much time going over that. One of the big things that we need to keep in mind, I think, from the interpretation that was provided is that, yes, duplex dwellings and developments are allowed in RMS, subject to all the rest of the requirements. Multifamily is not. This did come out of an original rezoning request for 10 fourplexes. Staff recommended denial based on the fact that it did not seem appropriate based on the surrounding land uses in Pocatello, the layout, the lot sizes, mass and coverage, which are all standards in the zoning ordinance for us to look at those. Planning and Zoning Commission did not deny, they don't have that power, but they did recommend denial, and Mr. Packer withdrew, which was entirely up to him. When this came in, and it has been talked about a little bit, but when it came in as a short plat with 2 lots, one for the existing home and one for the remainder. With that, though, with all of those duplexes on one lot, that, in our interpretation under the code, creates multifamily, which is not permitted in residential medium density single family. So that was a determination that they have to be on 8,000 square foot lots and they do have to be individual lots. Okay. To me, that's fairly straightforward at that point. What I want to point out is that the determination has broader implications than for this development alone. It has been a long time determination under both this zoning and past zoning ordinances that multiple units on a single lot creates multifamily, which is not permitted, again, in this zoning district. And to be honest, this includes a current code enforcement case we have going right now, where someone wanted to add a 3rd unit where only a duplex is permitted. So we're actually pursuing a similar kind of thing. We also, I lost my place in my strain of thought. Okay, further, the applicant's contention that the project as a whole meets the minimum area requirement would be no different than allowing, for example, 2 or more single-family homes on a single-family lot, or a great big lot that requires 7,500 square feet per dwelling unit to have 100 homes on it without subdividing. In essence, I'm not saying that would happen, but I'm looking at this from a zoning ordinance interpretation and how we interpret it for each development that comes through. We try to stick to the zoning ordinance. I think Mitch talked about why they prefer not to, and that's, we recognize that. We did, in our staff report for the rezoning, suggest that maybe as many as 12 duplexes would go in here. This is an estimate. This kind of thing is always an estimate when we don't have a full development plan in front of us. So yes, we did talk about the potential of a duplex development. These kind of initial responses are always assume that that all other standards will be met. Duplexes are allowed, subject to. So Mitch brought up the potential of infill development. This was brought to, we kicked it around very, very slightly, but the phone call on bringing in the infill standards came into us at about 4:45 today. I would have to say that initially looking at it, it was reliant on the multifamily infill development, which again is a different zoning. But we really didn't have time to thoroughly look through the zoning ordinance and see if it would work. We would be happy to do so, but we have to apply the zoning ordinance that's in front of us. So basically, based on the information presented, applicable municipal code, staff remains in favor of the determination that was made that the duplexes have to be on individual lots, meeting minimum lot sizes. We believe that to allow otherwise creates in essence a rezoning without the appropriate noticing and allowance for public input prior to the change. And we're also very concerned about the potential precedent that this would set for the next development that comes in potentially looking similar. I have enough lot size, I can put this on it without meeting the other standards that are there. I heard the question about the 5,015 square feet. What we did is, by way of example, generally with a street and lots along the street, the lot size is all contained off the street. In essence, what we looked at is that you only have about 5,000 square feet of livable area, of house and yard in something like this. It was not meant to say that that was all there was there. But by example, that's all that's there for the dwelling and its yard compared to a required 8,000 square feet. So that's really what I have for you. I'm happy to try to answer questions. It is a little difficult when we're trying to make a determination that's just the zoning ordinance and at the same time a development that we have preliminary plans for, but I'd be happy to help us walk through it.
So is a duplex, how much land is required for a duplex?
8,000 square feet.
Questions down here, Council?
Does the land that they're bringing in, does that include the house as part of it, or?
The way the short plat looked, that house would be on its own separate lot,
Okay,
leaving
so
the remainder
they're bringing in
for this development.
2.94 acres.
For the the duplexes themselves, yes.
And what would be the process if they wanted to rezone that in the normal sense?
Normal rezoning, you can go through normal rezoning, requesting the zoning ordinance or zoning district you want. It comes to we look at it as staff, goes to planning and zoning for a hearing and comes for a hearing.
So there's 2 public hearings?
There are 2 public hearings. There's also, and this is what the process was going before, was contract zoning, which allows us to look at a single proposed use for the piece of property without considering all the associated uses, the other uses that are allowed in that zoning district. So you can focus in on just the one use and see if that's compatible where other uses in that zoning might not be. The same process could be gone through for this in a contract zoning, look at it, or a total rezoning.
Is there public input at all for that?
Was there, or?
Would there be for contract zoning?
Yes, it follows basically the same process. It's just that it is for a single use rather than the zoning district itself.
And if we make this decision tonight, is there any public input that occurs?
Tonight, no. Our zoning code does not have any provision for a public hearing on an appeal of a determination by staff.
Councilwoman.
Are there any other developers who have wanted to do a similar thing who did have to subdivide their lots into smaller things for duplexes that would find this to be unfair if we were to allow this to go
have
forward as presented?
We have a fairly recent example of a developer who had a piece of ground, came in for rezoning, and I'm not sure, I know where it is, I'm not sure where it changed from one to another. Anyway, the rezoning did not go through, largely based on the fact that it didn't appear to be appropriate for the area. That developer has come back in with a full subdivision and actually dedicated streets, but with the duplexes meeting all the usual zoning ordinance standards and development standards. You'll see that plat before you middle of next month, I think.
Any other questions? Thank you, Melanie.
You bet.
Any questions for Mitch or Dave?
Couple more.
For Mitch?
First question. If I were a neighbor out there and I felt like something was not compatible with what my property is and how it's zoned, I would like to have some input, at least, to my neighbor. My understanding, how you mentioned that there were several people that commented negatively to your first proposal. Have you had a chance to poll or talk to neighbors out there about this proposal?
So let me tell you the difference, distinct difference, okay? It's an RMS zone. If you go to the zoning requirements, duplexes are allowed in the zone. Duplexes are allowed, okay? The only thing we're arguing about or debating is lot size, potentially, and whether or not we have to create a lot for them. That's it. Duplexes are allowed. When they move there,
Well, I see this as essentially a one-level apartment building.
it is they're two level. They're actually townhouses up and
Okay,
down.
so it's two-level, but they're all connected, aren't they?
No, they're two units. It's a duplex,
Okay.
side by side, right here.
And there's separation between them?
Yeah, they're duplexes. It's a duplex. But I will tell you that the code, the RMS code, as a whole, allows townhouses. So I could put a row of townhouses, 32 long, and have them. They're permitted. They're permittable. As long as you meet the lot size requirement, you can have
And what's the lot size requirement on a duplex?
8,000 square foot, 4,000 square foot per unit, per residential unit in there is what you have to have for lot size. So it's different. We did go through a zone change, a request. We proposed fourplexes. The neighbors came out and said, we don't like it. We think it doesn't fit with fourplexes, and so we went to duplexes, which we believe are allowed under the RMS zone. That's how we got where we're at.
If you were doing duplexes in the traditional sense, would you be able to count all your access with your roads and everything in there?
I think it depends on how it gets configured. But this project is distinct. It's infill, right? We talked about infill. I can't put a road in there. I don't have enough ground to put a public road in there.
If
I
you
only
took the
have
house
enough.
out,
What's that?
would you have enough land if you took the house out?
Potentially. But I don't think that's a good spot for an access due to its proximity to the intersection. And so, you know, it's possible, yes. I think, again, here's where my client is. Duplexes meet the standard, and I feel like I need to walk through the why it meets the standard as far as lot size. But essentially, a townhome is available. You can do lot size averaging. You can do kind of open space associated with a townhome development. So if these were plotted on individual lots, so each unit had a lot. So if I took this one duplex building and created two lots associated with that, then I could call this a townhome. And if it's a townhome, then I could make the lot lines go right around the building and just have open space everywhere else, and it's permittable. It's permitted in this zoning district as that way configured. All we're asking you to do is not make us go through that process.
Is there a degree of separation that they need to have setbacks if you had different lots?
The zoning, what's required in the zoning?
Okay, what is
12
it?
feet.
12 feet? Would that consume more of your land then?
No, that's what we have
You have 12 feet between them?
between the buildings, yes. We've met the separation requirements per the zone. We've met the setback requirements per the zone around the exterior of the project. Then the interior setbacks are met because if we did create lot lines, they would be in the parking lots and how they do that.
So basically what you would have to do if this was not approved is to put a duplex on an 8,000 square foot lot and do a survey increasing costs to the developer, increasing challenges with the water supply. What other things would we be looking at? I mean, to me, this looks like a smart way to go in terms of saving dollars and possibly making rents a little bit more reasonable.
The utilities are an extreme complication when we start talking about individual lots off of a private state water system, again, that's served off of the city water system. So in order to create individual lots there, we're not talking about a single water supply. Now we're talking about individual users within that project. And so it gets very, very complicated. It's going to delay. The subdivision per se is not the delay. It's now having individual lots within this project off of this private system, the private road system, the private sewer system, the private water system, that DEQ is going to look at all these individual owners that could potentially be in there. So if we create lots, now Mr. Packer can sell duplex, one side of one duplex to somebody, and he could sell another duplex to someone else, or however he wants to do that. He wants to keep it as a whole so that he maintains ownership, and that's essentially what he's asking to do. But if we do subdivide it, then it can be sold to people. And as it gets sold, then there's concerns about how those utility services get delivered, and it complicates that. If it's under unitary control, then those regulations and things are much easier to deal with.
Councilwoman Adamson.
Sorry, if you weren't done, you can.
I'm done.
So to me, this seems like a good project, even before you came tonight and made your argument about the infill. To me, this seems like a reasonable thing to have in this particular area. My biggest concern, I guess, is that if somebody else were not able to do a duplex without subdividing, and we allow it this time, then that potentially causes some unfairness to others. So I guess the question I have, I understand that the first time that when you applied for rezoning, it was with a whole different
Yes.
Plan with fourplexes. So with the units as they are right now, with the lower density, would that work for you to apply for a rezone and have it as a multifamily with lower density? To me, that seems to make sense, because I get the concern about maintaining, the driveways and the utilities and that type of thing if you start parsing it off.
I sort of get that, but it doesn't need rezone because it's permitted, right?
Well, unless you're making it a multifamily
Yeah, potentially.
complex, right? In which case, then it does need to
But
be
I still
rezoned.
think it's permitted. If we just subdivided it, right? So we could just go and subdivide it, like we're saying, and we wouldn't have any public input. We could just go subdivide it and meet those, as long as we can ensure water delivery and things like that, we could subdivide it with no public input. There'd be none. And I believe we can meet the density that we're proposing. Again, I could walk you through that detail. Hopefully you guys somewhat believe, and staff may not buy into my determination, but I believe it's correct. But we could subdivide it without any public input. As long as we went down that avenue, we could do it. Now, as far as having a public hearing about multifamily project, again, we had the public hearings when we created the zone that allows the use.
Well, I guess I'm not asking in terms of whether or not we would have a public hearing, but it seems to me like what you're presenting is a multifamily project, right? That would have, you would own the whole thing, so it would essentially be a multifamily development instead of individual duplexes, and so that's why I
We're not
would.
denying that it's not going to be a multifamily, there's going to be users, but let's, for instance, if there were a lot there, which we say is allowed under the code, how does that change it? It's still going to be a multifamily development, and Mr. Packer doesn't sell the lot, he just keeps the lot, and now it's still a multifamily development that with lots. And that's all we're saying. It really doesn't change it. We're not asking you to really waive your zoning ordinance or restrict something that isn't allowed. We believe what we propose here can be achieved under the zone. We can subdivide it, and I'm fairly sure that we'll try to go through that process if that's what you decide we have to do. But it's unlikely we're going to go back for a public hearing because it's allowed under the zone. Duplexes, townhomes are allowed outright with no public input under the RMS zone.
But they're allowed with subdivision. Am I misunderstanding
that?
that?
Yeah, that's what we're saying. So we would just.
So you're asking us to waive the subdivision requirement of the existing ordinance. So that's what we'd be doing, is waiving
we're basically
our
asking you
existing
not to
ordinance.
require us to subdivide and allow the project to move forward. He doesn't want to have individual lots. He does not want to have the ability to sell these individually. He wants to keep it as a unit. And yes, it is a multifamily project, but I don't think the subdivision changes that, right? It's still a multifamily project if we subdivide.
Can I ask for some clarification? You said that if Mr. Packer owns the whole thing, that simplifies it in terms of utilities, and if you sell them off individually, then it could get tricky as to how to provide those services and everything. Wouldn't subdividing them and making them individual lots actually get around that problem?
No, it's very complicated because it's a private water system, okay? So once we leave the street, and the city policy is, as we leave the street, then it becomes a private system. So they're not going to maintain any infrastructure off this right of way. So once we leave, it becomes a private water system. And if we have a private water system with one entity operating that system, then if the city, has a problem, they're dealing with Mr. Packer for the issues. And if DEQ has a problem, if there's a problem, they're dealing with Mr. Packer. If we have individual owners, now we're dealing with 32 different people within this development, although he's not going to sell it. But we have to set up the mechanism. If we create the lot, we have to set up the mechanism to be able to deal with that water infrastructure. And it can't be approved. We wouldn't be allowed to install that utility without having all that mechanism set up. And that is a very costly proposition. The subdivision is not the cost. It's going through the process to get those water systems and sewer systems approved to be able to deliver those utilities to these individual users. That's the cost in this that we're hoping to avoid.
I'm totally tracking with you on why subdividing is not the ideal situation. I still don't understand why going through a rezone and just proceeding with a multifamily. Help me understand why that's not what you want to do.
I guess I don't understand.
It's already zoned for what we're asking for.
Not for multifamily.
Well,
If each unit was on its own lot,
So, just a
then it would be
minute, Dave,
okay.
we'll need you to come up here and,
yeah, it's allowed. If it were on its own lot, nothing would change. It would be allowed. So if we go to a zone change hearing and say, hey, we want to do this project that's allowed under the zone, and everybody says, hey, we hate it, then what happens? Then we have to subdivide it? Then we're back here subdividing it. So, and it's allowed. The subdivision is allowed. So you know, if we're,
Well, and I guess
And
my
if you-
understanding was that maybe the reason for planning and zoning
I'm just back.
having some discomfort was with the higher density, and so I'm just wondering if this is now lower density, I don't understand why they wouldn't
One of the
recommend
biggest
that.
problems is, with the utilities that come in here, we would have to get easements to cross every one of those lots for power, gas, water,
if you have to subdivide.
if I have to subdivide it.
Right, yeah, I know
And if
that.
I don't
would
have
be a
to
big-
subdivide it, I can just put those in wherever, you know.
Right, so if we rezoned it to a higher
We're not asking
density.
for a rezone. It's already
Well,
zoned for duplexes.
I know, but I'm asking why we're not going why we're wanting to go this route instead of that route. That's what I'm still struggling to understand, sorry. Why wouldn't we just want to, if you want to keep it all the same and not subdivide it into smaller lots, why wouldn't you want to just do a
We could
multifamily
subdivide
with
the smaller
a change of
lots.
zoning?
That is an issue. And if we put each one of those, split the lots and have you know, essentially they're condos, but, you know, because they have a firewall down the middle of them and stuff like that, you can sell either side. You know, I mean, it's the same thing. You would have that many units, and at that point in time, you'd have one unit on one lot. And that would satisfy what people are asking us to do. But since I'm going to own them all, it doesn't make much sense to me to spend that kind of money to do the legal work, to get everybody so they can have easements across everybody else's property to get to the next one.
Yeah, I totally understand that. But
And
if you did a
I always
multifamily
hesitate to do
rezoned,
things
you
like
wouldn't have
that.
to do that, right?
If you had 32 owners in there with 32 different directions, you know, your chances of having
Yeah.
a slum out there would probably be really good real fast.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. I mean, it'd be hard to decide who's maintaining that driveway and replacing asphalt when you need to.
Yeah.
So I totally get that. I'm just wondering why we wouldn't
You're
do
asking me to ask for
multifamily.
zoning, and I already have the zoning. The zoning out there already gives me the duplexes.
Right, but I'm saying, why wouldn't you want to get zoning for a multifamily, not duplexes, but for a multifamily
Back to
project?
the fourplexes, you mean?
Well, you could still do a multifamily project that would essentially be this. Is that right? Maybe I should ask staff that, or if that would meet the qualifications. If they were to submit this exact thing as a multifamily thing that would be on one lot and request a change of zoning, would that go through, would that
This,
meet
yeah,
the
Melanie
requirements?
Gisley again. Yes, this could go back for either a rezone without the use specified for either RMM, RH, through the two hearings, and allow multifamily out there. Then the multifamily standards would apply. They would not have to subdivide. The lot size, it would change how you could configure it. Or we could go back through the contract zoning for either RMM or RH, specifically for this layout, and you would not have to subdivide. And Mr. Packer's right, yes, duplexes are permitted on individual lots, no question. Townhouses are permitted if they're platted. If these were townhouses, there would be a plat line through the middle of each house. And I understand that we are, to a certain extent, talking semantics, but we're talking the zoning ordinance's requirements. It's the integrity of the zoning ordinance in staff's view.
Other questions?
The house, how close is the lot line of the house to
20
the,
feet.
to the lot line?
Yeah. And that's already been put in. The house is separate from what.
Okay, and what is the typical distance back on the other lots around you?
It's not typical, but it's probably what's required.
yeah, I don't know, we could, you mean the other homes?
Yeah,
there?
like the joint houses.
Well, the property immediately to the east is about the same.
35.
I think that's a deck, but I think it's actually less. I don't want to get somebody into a
So they don't own, they don't own behind there?
Well, I don't know who owns it, but it's a separate parcel, so you gotta
Okay.
take the parcel line. Yeah, so there's another, on this one, you can see this is a separate parcel. And most of the homes around here are on very large lots, right?
How do they access that parcel?
I don't have a clue. I'm guessing through this lot, but I don't know.
If they,
I think, this, if you look at this parcel, it probably doesn't meet the residential setbacks on the side, and, it's got a little more room on the rear. And
That is a fourplex.
yeah, and this is a fourplex, but I don't think it's permitted as such. But this, again, I don't want to get everybody in trouble, but, this house has about a 30 and 35 feet or so, but there's a variety. This is an area that, was really developed 50 years ago, a long, long time ago. Most of these houses have gone in. You wouldn't see, and I'm sure you guys haven't seen a lot that goes in that looks like this, that's probably an acre. We can't do it. You guys can't afford to maintain them, and we can't afford to build them. And so it's not, you wouldn't see a development like this anymore. And that's why we're trying to infill some of these areas that are underutilized. It's a very underutilized area within the city that we're already providing a lot of utility service to. And so, we just want to be able to do this project.
Wasn't there a street that came off Hawthorne, an easement there, and that was vacated recently?
I'm not aware of that.
Where your access comes in off Hawthorne?
Here?
Yeah.
That I don't know.
yeah,
I don't think.
I think that's been there since time began.
yeah, not aware of one.
I thought there was a easement access there for a while, and we vacated it years ago,
Years ago.
6 years ago maybe.
Basically what we're trying to build is it's kind of like a gated community, because we only have the one road. I mean, it won't have a gate on it. You won't have people going through here that don't live here, because it goes no place else. So people can have their privacy, they can have some security. We're a stone's throw from the FBI, where they're putting 350 people to work. People can ride their bikes, they can walk. A lot of those are guys who are probably going to be buying houses and probably pretty good, but the guy who's working the gate or emptying the garbage cans probably can't afford those kind of things, where we could live close to the project.
Well, I understand, I'm kind of with Heidi, I understand the nature of your request, but I really feel like our zoning stands for what it is rather than what people want it to be. And I'm struggling because I'm afraid that if we do this, we're setting a precedent. If we allow things to be reconfigured by an appeal like this without any input from the public, then we don't have all the neighbors kind of having their right to defend their property. And so I struggle with that. I understand the economy of scale, putting in one utility hookup and all that stuff. That's only one connection fee. I understand that it's not, you don't have a lawyer, you don't have to do your legal descriptions and all that to gain your easement. I understand that having a survey and platting all that stuff out there is a hardship. But at the same time, you bought a property in an area that is zoned different than what you want to use it. Even though there are similar uses, they aren't the same uses, because that's why you're here. And I agree with our planning department's interpretation of our zoning. So,
Okay, Councilwoman Adams.
I have a question for our city attorney, and the question is, if we were to proceed and override the planning department's decision, what ramifications might there be for the city?
I think our planning director has touched on that, but basically they would be, it would be a decision that could be used by future developers to ask for the same exception to the rules that are contained in the ordinance. And it's possible that people that have gone through the process in the past would be able to go to this decision and say, why did I have to go through the process to subdivide, and this particular development didn't have to go through that process, and use that as some sort of argument against us. So it's not, it's hard to say what exactly the legal liability would be, but I think we've touched on what the ramifications would be.
So I would just ask, what does the subdivision do for the city? How does it benefit? I'm telling you that the project doesn't change on the face. We can accomplish it. What does the subdivision do other than we subdivided it? Does it make this neighbor to the north happier, less happy? It doesn't buy anything for the city necessarily.
you know, I would disagree. I think that I think that we do these plating and lot sizing for a reason. It's so that 40 years from now, there's a chance that somebody could buy off different parts of that. That when things change, we're more malleable to that change. And I think that's one of the reasons. I think that's why we have zoning like this, is to protect interests and to protect the future and neighborhoods. And I really struggle, because I understand it's infill and I understand the savings, but you're asking for us to say that we've interpreted. That's the exact nature of the request, is that our planning department doesn't understand our zoning and they misinterpreted it, and therefore we have to say to our planning and to everybody that's done the zoning, we were wrong, which I don't think
I don't think they misinterpreted the ordinance. I just don't think they've looked at the project in the detail that we have to find a way to accomplish the goals of the project. So they've interpreted it on the strict, rigid interpretation that says, hey, we need 8,000 square foot per lot, and we think we need roads too. That's how they've interpreted it. We're telling you that if it were a twin home, if this were a twin home, it's considered a detached house. It can be a twin home in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I could put fourplexes out here if I call them townhouses. If I call them townhouses, I can build fourplexes out here under the current zone with a plat. So I can give the neighbors what they didn't want if I really wanted to do that under the current zone with a plat. That's it. That's all that we're asking for, is not to have to do a plat. And if I do a twin home, or a townhouse, let's call it a townhouse. Sorry, a townhouse. If I do a townhouse, I can use what's called lot size averaging, where I can make open space around the buildings. And so then I'm just gonna make my lots be the buildings, right? So it's gonna be a building with a lot line down the middle, and now it's a townhouse. And it doesn't change. It doesn't change. And any other developer can do that. The only thing that the zoning ordinance is doing is telling me I can only put 33 units on this parcel. That's what the zoning ordinance is protecting. And if it's allowed under the zoning ordinance at 32 units, it's allowed. I just got to figure out a way to make it fit. And I can, but I think it's not necessary.
Councilwoman Adamson.
I would like to see you be able to do this project without having to subdivide into a bunch of different smaller lots. To me, it seems like a way to accomplish that without getting the city into a legal issue potentially, because we've waived a portion of our ordinance that and required something of someone else that we didn't require of you, would be to have it rezoned to a higher density, and I would support that. That makes sense to me. I think that makes sense. So I'm wondering, does that cause an undue burden
Well, it's
beyond?
going to delay the project, and let me just propose a hypothetical. We're going to go to planning and zoning, right? And my proposal to planning and zoning is going to be, look, this is what we're doing, and it meets the code. We love it. And the residents, as they do on every project, you guys don't get to see it, are going to come out and say we hate it.
But
And
then
they
you
will,
could appeal
no matter
it
what.
to us.
Everyone's going to say they hate it.
It comes to you regardless.
And I'm going to say, we love it, it meets the code, and planning and zoning is going to see all these people sitting here saying, you can't approve it, we hate it. And planning and zoning, more likely than not, is going to say, yeah, we agree with you, we're not going to approve it. It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. But if we say it meets the ordinance. So I'm going to be back here in 3 months or 4, making the same argument I am today. Hey, it meets the code.
And I'll just say, if you were to do that, I would feel much more comfortable with it for not creating extra liability for the city by potentially waiving something at the advice of our legal staff. So I know that's probably a disappointment to you to hear, but to me, I mean, I'd like to see you be able to get it done and make it happen, but to me, it seems like that would be the appropriate way to go.
Okay, council?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve Mr. Packer's request.
Second.
We have a motion by President Johnston and a second by Cheatham. I had to look again. Not used to seeing you down there.
Just say more, go ahead.
Connie, could you call the roll?
Johnston?
Yes.
Cheatham?
Yes.
Adamson?
No.
Gray?
No.
Lurick?
No.
Okay. Thank you. The request fails. We will move on then to agenda item number 7, B.I.D. Management Agreement, Old Town Pocatello. Council may wish to approve a renewal of the management agreement with Old Town Pocatello to administer and manage the operations of the Business Improvement District. B.I.D. Council may wish to also acknowledge that they have reviewed the employment agreement with Stephanie Pelagi with Old Town Pocatello and provided for in the management agreement.
I move we approve the B.I.D. management agreement for Old Town Pocatello.
Second.
We have a motion by President Johnston and a second by Bray. Connie, could you please call the roll?
Johnston?
Yes.
Gray?
Yes.
Adamson?
Yes.
Cheatham?
Yes.
Lurick?
Yes.
Agenda item 8, fire engines purchase agreements. Council may wish to consider a request from Pocatello Fire Department staff to authorize the purchase of 3 fire engines as presented during the December 14, 2017 study session, and authorize the mayor's signature on all contractual agreements associated with the purchase, subject to the following. 1, all purchase documents will be submitted to the legal department for review, and 2, the city finance department securing acceptable finance terms.
I could make all the motions tonight.
Okay. Mayor, I move that we approve the purchase agreement and that we submit all legal documents to the city finance department securing for, to the legal department, and then the city finance department will secure acceptable financing terms.
Second.
We have a motion by Bray and a second by Lurick. Connie, could you please call the roll?
Gray?
Yes.
Lurick?
Yes.
Adamson?
Yes.
Cheatham?
Yes.
Johnston?
Yes.
Thank you. Agenda item 9, addendum to Portneuf River Visioning Project Agreement with Utah State University. Council may wish to approve and authorize the mayor to sign, subject to legal department review, an addendum to the city's existing agreement with Utah State University for the Portneuf River Visioning Project. The addendum not to exceed $10,000 will be for generating schematic design, including budgeting and phasing options for Centennial Park. Funds are available in the Science and Environment Department reserves.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Bray.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve agenda item number 9, the addendum to the PORTNEUF River Visioning Project.
Second.
A motion by Bray and a second by Lurick. Connie, could you please call the roll?
Bray?
Yes.
Lurick?
Yes.
Adamson?
Yes.
Cheatham?
Yes.
Johnston?
Yes.
Thank you. Agenda item 10, Idaho Department of Parks and Recreation Grant, CUSICK Creek Trail. Council may wish to approve the submission of the following grant application for improvements to the CUSICK Creek Trail to reduce erosion and improve water quality. A, Idaho Department of Parks and Recreation grant in the amount not to exceed $15,000. And if awarded, B, authorize the mayor's signature on documents related to the grant, subject to legal department review, for improvements to CUSICK Creek Trail. Grant funds will be used to reduce erosion from the trail. Matching funds of 20% will come from Science and Environment Division, cash and in kind, as well as United States Forest Service.
Mayor?
Councilwoman Adamson.
I move that we approve submission of the grant and that we authorize your signature on the documents, the related documents, subject to legal review.
Second.
We have a motion by Adamson and a second by Johnston. Connie, could you please call the roll?
Adamson?
Yes.
Johnston?
Yes.
Bray?
Yes.
Cheatham?
Yes.
Lurick?
Yes.
Thank you. Agenda item 11, Idaho Department of Parks and Recreation grant, MINK NORDIC Center. Council may wish to approve the submission of the following grant application for a snow groomer to maintain East Mink Creek Nordic Center trails. A, Idaho Department of Parks and Recreation, IDPR, grant in the amount not to exceed $150,000, and if awarded, B, authorize the mayor's signature on documents related to the grant, subject to legal department review, to purchase a snow groomer to be used at the East Mink Creek Nordic Center. There is an 80-20 match required for the IDPR grant, or approximately $30,000. The Nordic Ski Club has committed $4,500 cash as a token of their commitment to the trail system. The remaining match funds would come from trading or sale of existing machine.
I have a question. Do we know for sure that the sale would generate the amount we need?
So could our Parks Director, John Banks, come up, please?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. John Banks, Parks and Recreation Director. Yeah, the Outdoor Recreation Supervisor, Lance Clark, has done some poking around with the vendors for this type of equipment and is very comfortable that there is enough value remaining in our current machine to obtain that.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilman Bray.
I move that we approve the submission for the groomer, that we authorize the mayor's signature on documents related to the grant, subject to legal department review.
Second.
We have a motion by Bray and a second by Johnston. Connie, could you please call the roll?
Bray?
Yes.
Johnston?
Yes.
Adamson?
Yes.
Cheatham?
Yes.
Lurick?
Yes.
Thank you. Agenda item 12, Intergovernmental Agreement, Bannock Area Drug Group Enforcement Squad, BADGES. Council may wish to accept staff's recommendation that the City of Pocatello Police Department enter into an intergovernmental agreement to jointly administer the performance of functions and activities related to drug trafficking enforcement throughout Bannock County, and authorize the mayor to sign said agreement subject to legal department review. This is a no-cost agreement that outlines the level of service and terms of the agreement. This agreement will increase the availability of federal funds, resources, and manpower for the police department.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve this intergovernmental agreement in the Bannock County area drug group enforcement, subject to all legal ramifications and your signature.
Second.
We have a motion by President Johnston and a second by Cheatham. Connie, could you please call the roll?
Johnston.
Yes.
Cheatham.
Yes.
Adamson.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Lurick.
Yes.
Thank you. Agenda item 13, Airport Lease Agreement, Jensen. Council may wish to approve and authorize the mayor to sign a lease agreement between the city and Dennis Jensen for land at the Pocatello Airport, upon which Mr. Jensen will build an aircraft hangar. The proposed lease permission is approximately 7,200 square feet of bare ground. The proposed lease term is 20 years with an annual rental rate of $1,068.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to ask a question of our airport director prior to the vote and motion.
Okay?
Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. David Allen, Airport Manager.
David, in reviewing some of the minutes of the Airport Commission meetings, there's been some discussion of possibly developing some of the land for additional hangars. What would be the long-term projections that you would anticipate and suggest that we consider in addition to this one movement?
We have roughly about a 2-year plan as far as where we're positioning hangars, where we've already got the environmental review approved. This is one of those 4 spots. One of those 4 spots is also a long row set of hangars. And we're exploring the possibilities for how to develop that to the maximum benefit. We can't afford, and nor is it feasible, to build a structure of 9 hangars like we own now. It just wouldn't pencil out. But we're looking at ways where we can do a shared wall type thing, where we can design the code so that others can build onto the existing hangar and continue on, so that there's no wasted space in between where you have to have a 10-foot setback. And now you've got 20 feet of gap in between each hangar.
This would not interfere in any way with that long-range plan?
No, this is actually the ideal spot for this size hangar. There's another spot that's much larger than this that we would not build it on because we anticipate a larger hangar being built within the next couple of years, possibly.
And what is the demand for hangar space at the present time?
Right now, the fixed base operator is full in the spaces that they lease from us. The 9 hangars that we lease are full. We have, I think it's 6 or 7 people on a waiting list for those hangars. And that's the status that I know of right now. And then all the other hangars that are privately owned, and there's only a handful of them, but they all have aircraft in them except for one, and that individual is working on selling that hangar to somebody that's an aircraft owner.
Councilman Bray.
Couple questions. What do we typically lease our hangars for?
It's $230 roughly per hangar, and there's 9 of those in a row.
Have we considered that there be a sunset clause on the ownership of the hangar on our land? I know a lot of public entities, when you build 20 years out, then the ownership goes to the place that owns the land under it. Have we done any conversation of that?
Without being able to look at the leases, I believe what they say is that it's up to the individual to remove existing structures and facilities or abandon them in place. I don't know if it says they must be left to us. I don't think that is in there.
Okay. I think that would be a good thing for us to do, because that lets us retain more control of our airport after a while. But I'm not going to hold this up with that idea. I just know that different places have all kinds of buildings and facilities built under those agreements that they lease it for a while and then it reverts. And I think that would be a good thing for us to look at. And it might be the way we get the 9 hangars built, is they own them, they lease them, they have a premium on them, they get their money out of it, and then they vacate it after a certain period of time.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Would you like me to speak to that? Because there actually is provisions contained in the lease that talk about that.
Sure. Okay.
The builder of the hangar would have at the end of the lease 60 days to remove the fixtures, including the hangar itself, and if they don't, that would become part of the property.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve the lease request by Jensen, subject to legal review and your signature if necessary.
Second.
We have a motion by President Johnston and a second by Cheatham. Connie, could you please call the roll?
Johnston?
Yes.
Cheatham?
Yes.
Adamson?
Yes.
Gray?
Yes.
Lurick?
Yes.
Thank you. Agenda item 14 is the discussion items, and we do not have anybody signed up for the discussion items. And so with that, thank you very much for attending tonight. We are adjourned.